Good morning, everyone. My name is Jeff Barlow, and I'm president of Healesville CoRE, which is short for Healesville Community Renewable Energy, Inc. We're all recovering from the recent storms that devastated our region, with many of us being without electricity for long periods of time, and many who look like being without power for many weeks to come. This has been a very difficult time for many people in our region. And for those still suffering, our thoughts and best wishes are with you. I would like to wish you all a very warm welcome on behalf of the Healesville CoRE Central Committee. I'd also like to acknowledge the country we meet on, which is the land of the Wurundjeri people, who are the traditional custodians of this land. I'd also like to pay respect to the elders, both past and present, of the Kulin Nation, and extend that respect to any other Indigenous Australians present this morning. Thank you for attending today's webinar, which we've titled Healesville and District Community Energy, the Local Power Plan. We are delighted to have with us today, and I'd like to welcome, firstly, the Mayor of Yarra Ranges Council, Councillor Fiona McAllister, who is also the councillor for the Ryrie ward, in which Healesville is located, who will provide our opening address. And Fiona will also introduce our keynote speaker for this webinar, who is Dr Helen Haines. Dr Haines is a member of the House of Representatives in the Federal Parliament, and she's the independent member for Indi. For those of you who are not aware of Indi, it's an electorate in northeastern Victoria, with Wangaratta being one of the main cities. Dr Haines will speak on what she's calling the Local Power Plan, an exciting and very powerful innovation in the community energy sector that is designed to provide both federal recognition of and funding for the development and expansion of community renewable energy across the whole of Australia. Dr Haines's bill, the Local Power Plan, was introduced in the Federal Parliament in February 2021, and if it is passed into legislation, it will provide enormous support for community energy groups such as Healesville CoRE. I'm very pleased to say that Healesville CoRE was one of the many community energy groups from around Australia that contributed to the development of the Local Power Plan when Dr Haines was seeking community input into the formulation of her plan. Following Dr Haines, we're delighted to have with us the two directors of a small company called Como Energy, Jonathan Prendergast and Gerald Ahrens. Healesville CoRE has partnered with Como Energy because Jonathan and Gerald have the technical and legal expertise to support the aims of Healesville CoRE in rolling out a community renewable energy landscape, including microgrids across Healesville, the Yarra Ranges municipality, and eventually across the whole of the eastern region of Melbourne, of Melbourne's outer suburbs. We've been impressed and excited by their creativity, their practical plans, and the exciting innovations they want to bring to life in the field of community energy, using community energy groups as their partners, including community ownership of renewable energy infrastructure, which is very exciting. I'm delighted to welcome all our speakers to this webinar, and I feel certain that you'll find the whole event a riveting experience that will expand your understanding of the field of community renewable energy. But before we go any further, I'd like to explain very briefly who we are as an organisation and why we exist at all. I'm the founder of Healesville Community Renewable Energy, or Healesville CoRE, our business name, and we were formed in 2017 after I was inspired by a national conference of community energy groups held in Melbourne in early 2017 by the Coalition for Community Energy. I met there Julian Guess and Simon Woodland from the sustainability team at Yarra Ranges Council. And after sharing my ideas with Julian, we set up a steering group in Healesville of around a dozen local community members, chaired by Julian, with the aim of trying to establish a community energy group. We launched the idea at a community meeting in June 2017 with around 230 people in attendance, one of the largest meetings in the history of Healesville, as the long-term residents tell me. Support from the Yarra Ranges Council through the grant funding and through support of the sustainability team has continued since our inception, and this cooperative approach is a very important aspect of our work. Our aim was and is to provide leadership for the local community in transitioning the town to net zero carbon emissions in respect of our electricity needs by 2027. To this end, we run 4 to 6 educational events for the community every year using council grant funding. We also apply for grants from the state and federal governments, from the Foundation for Regional and Rural Recovery and other funding bodies. We partner with other organisations to provide great deals for community members in the installation of solar panels and batteries and solar hot water, such as evacuated tubes and heat pumps. And we're now seeking to deepen our community penetration and to also broaden our impact across a wider geographical area. What motivates us is the spectre and the horrors of climate change, which are with us already. We want to bring awareness at the community level about how we can empower ourselves and how we can work together with local, state and federal governments to create more thriving, engaged and resilient communities. For us, renewable energy is not only an end, but also a means towards greater community engagement and greater community participation and ownership of our energy infrastructure. We have, in 4 years, achieved a lot for a small community voluntary not-for-profit group. We have over 100 financial members, a dynamic central committee that works very hard for the community with much love and energy, and we have a database of well over 750 people and organisations very interested in our work and wanting to be informed about what we are doing. I think that's enough from me to provide a broad framework in which we can locate today's webinar. And without further delay, I'm delighted to welcome Councillor Fiona McAllister to provide our opening address. Councillor Fiona McAllister, welcome.
Thank you, Jeff. And always a great privilege and a great joy to get to speak with you and all the members that will be on the screen, all the community. I would like to start by acknowledging that I'm very proud to have been born on the land of the Ngāi Tahu in Aotearoa. Very proud and humbled to live on the land of the Wurundjeri in the beautiful Yarra Valley, and pay my deepest respects to elders past, present and emerging, and any that are with us today. I also like to welcome Helen, who I know we'll hear from later, Federal Member for Indi, Dr Helen Haines, MP, also joined by fellow presenters Jonathan Prendergast and Gerard Arends from Como Energy, so welcome. And of course, Jeff, and a big thank you to Jeff for everything that he has done in this creating and leading and working with many others on this incredible group and the work that's been achieved locally. And of course, everyone that's on the screen or will be watching this later. It seems very timely, Jeff, and I know in our email conversation we expressed this because in Victoria we actually have a declared state of energy emergency, and the events of the last week have been particularly trying, and from the Yarra Ranges Council perspective, it has been a disaster. We've had floods, we're still dealing with the recovery from COVID, and of course the energy emergency that has played out and will continue to play out for some time. Over 200,000 homes across Victoria were without power, and that is the largest number, certainly on record. 50,000 plus of those were within Yarra Ranges, and we still have thousands without power on day 9, and will be without power for the next few weeks. So to be talking about local responses and power plans and different ways to come together as a community around energy, the timing has never been more perfect. And whilst I'm coming off the end of a rather tiring and very anxious week, I'm really pleased to be part of this event today. The push in the media, interestingly, and of course the phone's ringing hot, everyone wanting to know what's going on, but the recent round of questions have all been about should we underground every power line? And it's interesting, again, thinking the context of what we're talking about today, which is really around community engagement, local participation, local solutions and renewable energy, that's the push that's already happening. And clearly something needs to shift, because I suspect this won't be the first time that we see that type of impact of major storm or other events coming through in terms of power. But surely there has to be more sustainable and better local solutions that will avoid us facing this type of disaster and our community going through the trauma that they are currently going through. I'm very pleased that groups like CoRE and Yarra Glenergy and so many others formed by community in Yarra Ranges are having a strong voice. And having Helen here today, who I know her view is bring on the debate, absolutely perfect timing, because we need a loud voice in this debate to make sure whatever happens in the coming months and years is right, is renewable and is local. So Council, as I'm very proud to say, has been very committed and focused on sustainability for many years. And thank you, Jeff, for talking about Julian and the wonderful team that we have at Council. And there are many who have made such great contributions to working with community and supporting community. We've replaced lights, water, heating systems with energy efficient alternatives, and have made a substantial investment in thousands of solar panels on public buildings, a program that continues. At last count, we'd installed 49 solar systems on council buildings, and as many of you know, we now have 3 Grid Connect facilities, the Memo Hall, which we would have been in Healesville, if not for COVID restrictions, the one in Yarra Glen and Yarra Junction, that are fully powered by renewables and have the capacity to operate off-grid in times of emergency. The result of this work has been keeping our energy costs low. And in some cases, we have buildings running through much of the year at no energy cost due to the significant amount of power that we're able to generate. Through collaboration with a group of other councils, from July 1st, our electricity for our street lighting will be sourced from renewable energy from wind farms in Western Victoria, something that I'm very proud to celebrate and a great step forward for us as a council. As I mentioned earlier this year, with the assistance of the federal government, we completed our 3 upgrades, and we now have 3 community facilities able to operate independently from the grid, and I'm hoping they are only the first of many. These facilities will function, and did function, in the last week as emergency relief and recovery centres, and we will continue to activate these and hopefully many others into the future as needed. We've also implemented similar battery energy storage systems at other facilities, and our sustainability team continue to support community initiatives and wonderful groups such as Healesville CoRE. And as the Ryrie Ward Councillor, I always feel quite parochially proud to know that 2 of the very strong groups, Yarra Glenergy and Healesville CoRE, are within the valley. We also have 2 programs that support community uptake in renewables. A Solar Savers program that has so far helped over 100 households adopt solar, and our environmental upgrade program, which has helped businesses with solar and battery installs and has proved to be very popular. Very soon, we'll be launching an expanded Solar Savers program to include an Energy Savers program that will assist businesses not only adopt solar, but also upgrade appliances and lighting with energy efficient alternatives. And we're working on a biochar facility to turn woody biomass into a carbon-rich soil enricher that can sequester carbon. There'll be some announcements on this in the coming weeks. And a solar farm, hopefully in Healesville, is in the mix, utilising land on our utilising closed landfill sites. Very happy to always talk about any of these things, and I know our team would also welcome any questions that you might have. The timing's very right and always has been very urgent for these conversations. And as we sit in a state of energy emergency in Victoria and are looking at the way forward, never has there been a better time for us to have a voice. And as I look at Helen's website and quoting directly from it, talking about Indi, we choose to use our voice and hear the voices of others. We're engaged, we step out and we speak up. Great words, and certainly very true words for us in Healesville and the Yarra Valley and the Yarra Ranges. And I would encourage everyone that's watching and listening today to have a voice, because renewable energy and the conversations we need to have about the provision of power, not just in Victoria but across Australia, are critical for us at the moment. So I'd now like to warmly welcome Dr Helen Haines, MP for the federal and neighbouring seat of Indi, who will be presenting on the local power plan. And I also would like to acknowledge that when Helen was elected in 2019, she was the first independent federal parliamentarian ever in the history of Federation to succeed another independent member in the same seat. So congratulations, Helen. We're thrilled to have you with us. I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Gosh, thank you so very, very much, Fiona, for that really generous, very generous introduction. It's a total thrill for me to be joining with you today. I'd like to acknowledge too the traditional owners of the lands on which you are meeting me from, the Wiradjuri, the lands of the Wiradjuri people. I'm coming to you from Bangarang country, and across Indi I represent many, many people on the lands of the Tanarong, the Wabaru, the Dadaroa and Bangarang peoples, and it's a great privilege and joy for me to do that. And I acknowledge 60,000 plus years of culture across our incredible nation, and acknowledge the science, the art, the resilience of our First Nations people. And every day I think about the lands on which I walk and what we can all learn from the generosity of the sharing of the knowledge of our First Nations people. I want to acknowledge Jeff and the fantastic community energy group that is CoRE Healesville. Thank you for your leadership, Jeff, and thank you for the invitation to join with you today and share some of the vision that you helped me create. I'd like to acknowledge Gerald and Jonathan also, the expertise that you bring to this meeting today, and a big hello to all the people who are listening online who I can't see, but I know you there, and it's terrific that you've been able to join on this morning of what has been such a traumatic and long week for you, or longer than a week, of no power and extraordinary disruption across your community. I really feel for you. Some members at the southern end of my electorate around King Lake are experiencing the hardship that you're experiencing too. So I really feel for you and hope that this can be resolved quickly. I think Fiona's, well, it won't be quickly, it's going to be weeks, so I feel for you. Fiona's words are so true, that with that the extraordinary disruptions that we have been experiencing, and what you're experiencing in such a powerful way right now, means that this is actually a perfect time for us to be talking about energy and energy security. And I think for me, the incredible events of 2020 and now 2021 have given us Australians really a once in a generation moment to decide what we want our future to be across many, many areas actually, but in this instance across energy. Because especially in the regions, people are hungry for practical ideas about how to seize the momentous opportunities before us and build a generation of shared prosperity. And I firmly believed renewable energy is one such opportunity. I represent a rural and regional electorate, and I know that regional Australia has the best renewable energy resources in the world, and a boom in investment is already underway. And the real challenge, I think, is to ensure that everyday Australians, like all of you listening online, can actually share in the benefits of this inevitable boom. And community energy, which I define as where everyday people are empowered to develop, to own, and to benefit from their own energy projects, is a way to ensure that renewable energy boom happens with and for us, not to us. Over the past year and a bit, communities and experts across Australia have worked together with me, and Jeff's just mentioned earlier that Healesville CoRE was one of those groups to co-design a practical, realistic blueprint to bring cheap, clean, local power to us on the ground in our communities where we live, and especially across rural and regional Australia. And that plan was formulated to become what we call the local power plan. So last winter, almost a year to the day actually, in the depths of the big lockdown, I opened a great big community conversation, which, as Fiona said, is one of the ways we go about our work in Indi, is to speak up respectfully, engage with each other, and come forward with positive, good ideas. So a discussion paper was launched about community energy, and people from right across the nation, community energy groups, businesses, everyday people were invited to contribute to that discussion paper and put submissions to me about how they thought we could work together to really scale up this thing called community energy. And I was so thrilled that we received 100 fabulous submissions into that process. And then my team worked with an expert panel of 15 local people and a couple of academics too, from ANU, community battery experts and others, to formulate what became known as the local power plan. And if any of you would like to have a detailed look at that, you can just Google localpowerplan.com and you will find it. I've got a special website there that explains all the work that we did. Or you can go to my website, helenhaines.org, and read all about it there too. But I'm going to step you through that because that local power plan came to life last year. And then what flowed from that was my job as a federal member of parliament to work with the Parliament of Australia to enable the kind of legislation that we might need to bring our local power plan to reality. And to that end, I've been meeting with every single MP in the federal parliament. I sent them a copy of the local power plan. I've met regularly with the Minister for Energy and Emissions Reduction, Minister Taylor, and I've met frequently with the Prime Minister to explain to him what this could mean. And I've met with the Deputy Prime Minister and leader of the national parties to explain again why community energy is actually regional development. So Tom, could I have the next slide, please, or Michelle? Great. Look, I'm sure that anyone who's online today doesn't need to be told this stark reality that renewables are taking hold in Australia. All these slides will be available for you to have a look at later, but you can see here on this graph that over the next 20 years, 60% of Australia's coal fleet is set to retire. That's not a political statement, that's simply a fact. And over the same period, the lowest cost pathway to meet our needs is going to be renewables. And I've got a few facts there, that 47 gigawatts of new grid scale renewables, 21 gigawatts of dispatchable energy, and a five-fold increase in distributed solar generation. And I think this term distributed generation is one that so rings true for all of you right now, sitting in an environment where our centralised our energy generation is currently failing. So the opportunity for a distributed network is a new way of thinking about how we share our power, how power works across the nation, and it couldn't be more relevant than right now when people are in a situation with no power at all. So in 2019, Australia actually installed 6.3 gigawatts, and probably Gerald and Jonathan will know the latest data of renewable energy, and that's almost 4 times the size of the Hazelwood power station, and that figure will be greater even now. Can I have the next slide, please, Michelle? So right across Australia, there are identified regions called renewable energy zones, and I've got a map there which just shows you these are zones that have been determined by the federal government, showing where are the areas where we have the greatest opportunity to generate renewable energy. You can see that that's right around the east coast, down the southern part of Western Australia, and then up into the northern part of Western Australia and the Northern Territory, Tasmania too. And these zones, particularly in New South Wales, have already attracted billions of dollars of private investment. Now, billions of dollars of private investment in these zones has not necessarily actually improved the lot or the prosperity of the regional areas where they're situated. And that's the bit that I really want to change. One of the things that people say to me is, Helen, we know that you are a warrior for real practical action on climate change, but we never hear you talking about the Paris Agreement, or we never hear you talking about percentage of emissions that we need to reduce. And there's a very thought through reason for that. When, as a federal member of parliament, I'm trying to bring people along with me, I know that the whole debate on climate change has been a really polarised one and has separated people rather than bringing them into a space where they can talk about how we can change the way we do things and how we can all prosper. So for me, I talk a lot about what a transition to renewable energy with a distributed network can mean for prosperity and can mean for everyday people having lower power bills and greater security with their energy and a greater opportunity to invest themselves and actually profit from this huge transition. Next slide, please, Michelle. Yep, next one. Thank you. Thanks, Michelle. So this full benefit hasn't been seen, and that's what I want to change. So right now we know that community projects such as what Jeff and CoRE are championing through their work has received insufficient support from our governments. Now in Victoria we're seeing fantastic change in that space, and in fact the Victorian government have been a leader in supporting renewable energy through a community energy framework, but our federal government has not been engaged in this in the same level, and that's what I want to change. I want to see a scale up of the federal government getting involved in supporting community education, community energy. We know there's been a lack of emphasis on local jobs and local schools in the renewable energy projects that have been that are happening already in regional Australia. And we know that most of the profit from the large-scale renewable projects in solar and wind are not coming into regional communities. Much of that profit's actually going offshore. And we also know that there hasn't been a focus from the federal government on investment in local skills development so that our young people have a real opportunity to have a career future in renewable energy generation. Next slide, please, Michelle. So if regional communities are really to benefit from this boom, we need community energy, and we need community energy such as I've described, where everyday people actually own, develop or receive tangible benefits from this renewable energy boom. Next slide, please, Michelle. While that slide's changing, I'll just tell you about my community of Corryong in the upper area of Indi, right up there on the Murray River, as you know, was smashed in the Black Summer bushfires. Now, Corryong is a farming community. It's largely dairy farming and beef farming. It's the man from Snowy River kind of country. The people of Corryong have not been known for their action on climate change, in the sense that you won't see people marching on City Hall carrying banners from Corryong. But what you will see up there in Corryong is a very active group of local people supported by their local government now to find ways to give Corryong energy security, because during the Black Summer bushfires, Corryong was without power for several weeks. just like you're experiencing now. Corryong was out without mobile phone coverage because the mobile phone towers had no power to them, and Corryong Health Service had to be evacuated because there was no power or telecommunications. That community was extremely exposed. Many elderly people in that community, and the vulnerability that they experienced during that period of time is one that they now want to do something about. And I've been really delighted to work with that community and recently secure over $3 million now to establish a microgrid project in Corryong, and working towards a community battery up there as well, so that they can essentially make themselves islandable from the grid should another natural disaster occur, and achieve the energy security that they need to function safely. There's essentially 5 broad models of community energy, and I'm not going to go into them in a lot of detail because many of you will know about these already, but essentially there's the community investment model, and they're models such as what we've seen in Hepburn and in Denmark and WA as a couple of examples. There's a co-investment model such as what we see with the Sapphire Wind Farm in New England, in New South Wales, whereby a large private organisation has offered a share investment model to the local community. There's the philanthropic model. I opened such a project from a philanthropic model recently down in Benalla, where the local community energy group partnered with the local solar farm and some philanthropists and put solar panels on the roof of the kindergarten and a battery there so that they could lower their energy costs and have secure power. There's totally renewable towns, such as we have in my electorate of Indi, the totally renewable Yakandanda project. Many of you will probably know about that. Yakandanda will be totally renewable by next year, 2022, which was their goal. And the week after next, I'll be opening their community battery, which is a thrilling part on the progress to being completely renewable. And then, of course, there's the community council partnerships, and I think this is where you've got great engagement in your region with your local council. And we're seeing this over in Shepparton, where the Shepparton City Council is partnering with the community energy groups to establish a mid-scale solar farm, and all of the benefits and profits from that will come back into local council and lower rates and provide opportunities for all the people of the Shepparton region. Great models. Next slide, thanks, Michelle. We've all got a bit of a lag, haven't we, as this comes through. So we know that there's lots of benefits to this. I've gone through them really already. Reliability, reduction in emissions, local empowerment, people getting engaged with the generation of their own electricity and profiting from that, disaster resilience. There's opportunities for our First Nations people and the Tanarong people in the southern part of my electorate have a fantastic community energy project that they're working on. And of course, there's also the social justice element of this, and the opportunity for social license around people who don't necessarily have the opportunity to or the affordability of putting solar panels, for example, on their roofs. There's opportunities here where we can assist them to do that in a way that brings benefits to everyone. Next slide, thanks, Michelle. So we also know that there's enormous economic benefits. I work closely with many farmers who can tell me that the benefit of having a solar panels at scale on their property or a wind turbine on their property brings them a kind of income that they were not able to access before. And if we think about a nation such as Germany, we know that 30% of all renewable energy projects in Germany are owned by farmers. and that's an extraordinary thing. We know that a further proportion of those renewable energy projects are owned by local communities, and in the Scandinavian countries where I've spent a lot of time, similarly, local communities own the renewable energy projects and they directly profit from that. Imagine this, in a case of long-standing drought, that another form of income for our local farmers is the generation of power that they sell. And for small rural communities and local governments, that some of the inputs into their coffers is coming from renewable energy. This is an enormous opportunity which we're currently not embracing in Australia, and we really need to. Next slide, thanks, Michelle. So there's 5 key opportunities to really accelerate and scale up community energy. We need to attract strategic investment capital. We need to establish local hubs around the nation so that people like Jeff and his team don't have to reinvent the wheel every time they want to start a particular project. We need these hubs so that we can share technical expertise, and then we can have funding delegated to hubs that can be distributed to local projects at a time when those local projects are ready to roll. And we need to establish a centralised federal agency to enable this to happen. We need to introduce public underwriting scheme to de-risk these mid-scale projects that currently are a missing middle between the small microgrids and the larger scale projects. And we need to enable communities to co-invest in large scale projects. So we need some legislation to make that happen, and I was very proud in February this year to bring local people to the Parliament, people who contributed to the local power plan, who identified these 5 opportunities and introduced to the Parliament a private members bill which would allow these 5 opportunities to actually take off. Next slide, please, Michelle. So the Australian Local Power Agency Bill was born, and that piece of legislation is now sitting in the Parliament, and I'm calling on the government to put that on the agenda to debate at the right moment, and the right moment will be after this agency legislation has gone to parliamentary committee for review. Now, to get a piece of local or private members' business legislation into the parliamentary committee system is not an easy thing. Mostly governments want to have their own bills examined in committees, and that's fair enough. If you're the government of the day, you have control of the agenda. But as I said to you at the beginning, part of what I try to do as an independent is work with the members of parliament who are there for good public policy. And I was really pleased after a fair bit of knocking on doors and lots of cups of tea to convince the parliamentary committee for energy and the environment to accept my legislation for a parliamentary inquiry and review, and that's going to happen around July. And when that happens, I'm going to put a big shout out to you, Jeff, for people across the region to put in a submission into that review. It doesn't have to be fancy, but to have the voices of the people of your region into this is really important. Next slide, thanks, Michelle. Terrific. So I'm not going to go into this in enormous detail, but essentially the responsible minister who could really, with the stroke of a pen, make this a reality for us is Minister Taylor. And right now we have 2 agencies that enable investment into renewable energy. We've got the Australian Renewable Energy Agency, and we've got the Clean Energy Finance Corporation. They're there. I am suggesting that we bring in a sister agency called the Australian Local Power Agency, and that's what my bill is talking about. And you can see that there, the Australian Local Power Agency bill there, 2021, and that bill would develop and facilitate investment in community energy. I've had it fully costed through the Parliamentary Budget Office. It would need about 20 FTE of people and would cost $2.1 million to establish. Next slide, thanks, Michelle. I'm not going to go to this slide in great detail, but you might want to have a look at it later. Essentially, this Australian Local Power Agency would fill a gap in the current framework that we have to enable us to invest in hubs right around the nation and to invest a sum of money into these hubs. And again, I've had this fully costed through the Parliamentary Budget Office. I'm asking the government for $480 million over 10 years, so $48 million a year. I don't think it's a lot of money. Doesn't sound like a lot of money anymore after the billions of dollars that we have been spending over the last 18 months. But that amount of money going into our local power hubs to be deployed on the ground into the kind of work that we need to happen to scale up the community energy projects. Next slide, thanks, Michelle. Okay, so if we were able to do this, we would be able to address those 5 key opportunities that I just spoke of. We'd establish what I'm calling the local power scheme, which is these 50 hubs across the nation. It would establish the second pillar, which would be the underwriting new community investment scheme, whereby in mid-scale projects, if there's a 51% ownership by the local people or local government, and the other 49% by private companies, that the government would underwrite the initial expenditure. And the third pillar being this community renewable investment scheme, where large-scale renewables must offer local communities a 20% opportunity to invest. Now, if local communities don't wish to do that, fine, it doesn't hold up the project, but it's the legislation would say you must make the offer. Next slide, please, Michelle, and I'm conscious of the time, so we'll whiz through. Okay, so the Australian Local Power Agency would provide, if it was legislated, direct financial and technical support to community energy projects right across the nation. And I have a vision that if we were to start this next year, we could achieve significant improvements and significant benefit to local communities by 2030. I think we have the skills out there, but it needs scaling up and it needs deliberative action to make that happen. So as I said, each of those hubs would have access to a fund of $310 million and be able to offer grants to people on the ground who can demonstrate that they have a project. Organisations such as Jeff's organisation would have access through the hub, and the skills would be there to help make that happen. Next slide, thanks, Michelle. Okay, so again, this slide is telling us about that mid-scale level, the underwriting new community investment schemes. I've spoken of that. So next slide, thanks, Michelle. That's where the government underwrites mid-scale if we can demonstrate there's a 51% local ownership. And the third one, again, as I've just spoken, 20% offer to local people of all large-scale all large-scale solar, wind, or indeed hydrogen projects. And next slide, thanks, Michelle. When I walk this around the Parliament, I get very surprised looks, I must say. People say to me, this is incredible. Why hasn't anyone thought of this before? And my word to them is the people across the nation have thought of this before. There's over 100 community energy groups across the nation, probably a few more. 13 of them are in my electorate of Indi, and they've been telling me about this since before I came to Parliament. What I'm doing is bringing the voices of the people to you, and the work that we've done to co-design a suite of public policy that's really a gift to the government. I've said to the Prime Minister many times, you can take my logo off the front and put yours on if you like. I don't mind. This is a good idea, and it's a good idea that's co-designed by the people of regional Australia. So as I said before, the entire plan would cost the federal government just under $50 million per year. Next slide, thank you. Just while that's coming up, the reaction from the Prime Minister too has been positive. He said to me, Helen, when non-government members come to me with ideas, I usually tell them the conga line of people who've been there telling me it's a bad idea. But I simply haven't had a single person tell me that your plan is a bad idea. So see that as a good sign. This slide is just, again, talking about the return on investment. We know in Victoria that when they've undertaken support of community energy projects, there's a 13-fold return on investment. And I've just done the calculation there that with if the federal government were to invest $310 million, as I'm suggesting, that there would be a $4 billion return on that investment across the regions, and that would be a game changer in regional Australia. Next slide, thanks, Michelle. And as this slide comes up, I'm just going to sum up now by saying the communities of Australia who worked with me to co-design the local power plan have made it really clear to me that this is something that they really want to do. The numbers stack up. Members of the Parliament see this as a good idea. I know that this is something that could truly make a difference to regional Australia, not just in terms of providing an income source, but it would provide energy security as we move away from a centralised grid. I think that the timing is perfect. I've asked the government to invest in this in the next budget. They failed me on this budget, but you know, we don't give up very easily in this game, and I think the parliamentary inquiry is a really important step now to get that committee to make recommendations through to the Energy Minister and ultimately to the Treasurer to look at this seriously as an opportunity for regional development and a real opportunity to lower emissions, lower energy prices in a way that's really apolitical. And that's where I'll leave it.
Thank you very much, Helen, for your presentation. This is a really exciting project that you're working on, and certainly as somebody who's working with Healesville CoRE at the grassroots of with our community in relation to renewable energy, we see very clearly the need for what you're talking about and this great vision that you're putting forward. We pull our hair out sometimes in frustration at just how sensible it is to be working at the level of community energy, but basically to be working in a vacuum without the power structures and the financial structures behind us to be able to do what we really need to do. And it becomes an exhausting process for volunteers working on the ground to try to achieve what is almost unachievable without the power structures and the finance behind what we're doing. We try to do what we can with the support of council and with getting grants from the government and so on, but it is an extremely tedious job as a group of volunteers. So what you're advocating is something that I think will alleviate a lot of the strain and the stress for volunteers, a lot of the burnout that is actually happening in community energy groups, and will provide a vision, I think, for us to work towards in the future. Healesville CoRE certainly thanks you very much for the work that you're doing, and we very much look forward to this plan of yours coming to fruition, and we wish you well in shepherding it through the halls of Parliament to the very difficult task of getting it passed as an act of law in this country. So thank you very much for coming today to present your local power plan to Healesville CoRE and our community, and we wish you well with getting this off the boards. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you so much, Jeff.
Okay, so let's move now towards the next stage in our presentation with Gerald Ahrens and Jonathan Prendergast from Como Energy. Healesville CoRE has partnered with Como Energy because we're a voluntary group of volunteers who are just ordinary people within the community trying to do trying to create incredible technical projects which we know nothing about. And in order to achieve what we need to achieve, we need to bring experts in to assist us. It's very difficult going out and getting an expert for this project, an expert for another project, and so on. And from our perspective, we're delighted to be able to combine with Como Energy with two people, with Gerald and Jonathan, who have a lot of experience, a lot of and a lot of very creative ideas that they've been presenting to us. And what we're looking forward to is, well, we have been working together now for a period of time with ideas and with grant applications and so on. And Gerald and Jonathan have been put in a huge amount of pro bono work for us, for which we're very grateful. We are hopeful that at least one or more of the grants that we've applied for will come to fruition in the not too distant future, to be able to achieve some of the bigger projects that we're wanting to achieve as a community energy group, which we can't do, as Helen said and as I said earlier, without the power structures behind us and without finance. But the expertise that Helen spoke about, the community energy groups need, is also available independently through small companies like Como Energy, and they're really part of the energy revolution that is occurring now. A lot of people out in the community going about daily life don't really realise that we are actually in the middle of a revolution in community energy in this country. And what Helen has been talking about is integral to developing that revolution and giving it some legs to be able to move along much more quickly and dynamically. Gerald and Jonathan today are going to talk about the Healesville microgrid and how communities can become more resilient in the face of increasing disasters such as bushfires, the local storms that we've had, floods, and so on.